There's been a weird grammar habit going on of late. Um, Now, I studied university. I went to university and I studied linguistics. I've always had a facility for language. I don't write these scripts. This is how I can really talk. I don't really, and that's part of it too. I don't really talk like this all the time because sometimes I'm with people who talk differently, and then I talk more like them because it makes them feel more comfortable. So I'll slip into other dialects, and that seems strange in America, but in Britain and Europe, it would not feel nearly as strange to think, oh yeah, okay, so sometimes you slip into another dialect just so you can fit in. Perfectly sensible. But my ability to notice language, to know, the language I was taught is correct as a child versus the language I'm hearing, that sort of thing, causes me to notice things like some weird habits of modern speech that have been... I mean, we've all got that "those words aren't words" thing. We've all got that one in. I just finished the dishes, actually. Just. The sink's got to finish draining, and then I can clean the compost out of the middle of it. Yeah, so we got some weird, I don't like that. That's not a word, You can't say that. Say this other word. And why? We've got... what an awful angle for me. Dear me. We've all got, a number of these things in our lives. But this little grammar picadillo is a little bit different, and it's taken me a while to figure out what's going on enough to have anything to say about it. Now, at first blush, I'm having a problem. I'm going to sit me down on the chair here. I just did a Riker on that chair, You wouldn't know. Ha ha. And this, you are on top of a butterfly? That's not a good choice. I have this butterfly jar. It's not a real butterfly, but it behaves like one. So, butterfly jar. And I've got a treat jar here that I'm going to put you on. And sit back and continue the rant. So I don't want to talk about, you can't use that word, but I've been noticing that people don't say when anymore, they say whenever. So they say, when I went to the store last night, I bought a lottery ticket. Versus, whenever I go to the store, I always buy a lottery ticket. But now the habit is, whenever I went to the store last night, I bought a lottery ticket. And I've been noticing it coming from, I recently heard it come from Britain. So it started in America, but because of the internet, it's now spreading throughout the English language, and we're going to have to get used to it for those of us that go when we hear it. But it had me thinking, well, what is that? And then I thought about some other ones. When I seen it, I thought, well, how do you get seen instead of saw? When I saw that, I saw it yesterday. No, they say I seen it yesterday. Well, they're removing the word have from the phrase because humans do lazy speech. Because when a speech habit gets entrenched, we drop extra syllables. We went from I've seen, I have seen, to I've seen, to I seen. That was, to me, as a linguistic, I'm not a professional linguist, but as someone who studied linguistics, that seemed to me pretty logical. So I seen, I have seen. So again, not I saw, the active tense, but I have seen, the passive tense. Something softer, a little bit backed off a little, I'm not actively making a statement. I'm just telling the story. Even though the statement might be something as, I got you that book you were looking for whenever I was whenever I was at the store for you, I had gotten you the book today. Is going to be afraid. That is a mouthful we're going to hear, but we're going to hear it without the word have. So whenever I was at the store, I gotten you a book. We're going to hear that sort of thing. It's hard for me. I was trained in school to speak well, and my parents didn't. My parents, being immigrants and learning the language themselves, didn't interfere with the process of teaching me proper Queen's English, as they called it. North American, Canadian English. We didn't speak with a British accent, but we spoke the Queen's English. We spelled it the way the Brits did. And so whenever I hear people make these mistakes, I really notice it. And when I notice it, I think about it. Now here's the thing. And no, I do not have the COVID. I have the asthma. I will get out every time I'm in a store and I start to cough, every single time, I get this out. Not so much to use it as to brandish it so people know I'm coughing from asthma. It's really bad in the mornings. Yeah, passive active voice. These are grammar terms that most people manage to avoid actively learning in school. Me among them. I'm still figuring out what past tense versus active past tense. But that is what we're talking about here. We're talking about passive versus active speech. And that we can understand. Passive speech. Why would a whole nation start speaking in passive terms? And it's quite unconscious. Keep that in mind. This is a subconscious thing. This is not a movement. This is an evolution, if you will. Evolution is not a deliberate activity. Evolution is something that happens to a species because of pressures that they cannot remove. So a species under pressure will first try to remove the pressure. They'll either remove the source of the pressure or they'll remove themselves from the source of the pressure. If they cannot remove the pressure, then they begin to adapt or die. And language evolves in a similar way. It's a similar mechanism. What works, what doesn't work, what communicates what we better versus what doesn't. And why would an entire nation start speaking in a passive voice? Well, it's a nation in which tyranny is rising. It's a nation in which authority figures boldly. It's a nation in which authority takes an extremely militant and intimidating appearance in the form of its outlying enforcers. That thin blue line is not thin anymore, and it's not blue anymore. It is now a thick black line. Bulletproof, Kevlar, and riot gear thick. And this is affecting the consciousness of people who aren't at the riots every bit as much as it's affecting the consciousness of people who are. And these riots have been ongoing. I'm sorry to say, your civil war has been going on since the 50s. America has been in a civil war between the races and the classes, ongoing, with active skirmishes, longer than I've been alive. Honestly, you have. And it's coming to a head this summer with people of all colors and classes and one common agreement, all joining forces in the streets against authority, who is responding like a person with multiple personality disorder, but then it is multiple persons, so that makes sense. It's responding variously with compassion and militant strength, which does nothing to alleviate the CPTSD that might cause an entire nation to start speaking passively, even while they're working actively. Even while they're physically living-wise, they're being more active. They're acting, but still speaking passively. I find that really fascinating, and it will be interesting to watch as time passes. Will their speech become more active if their action is successful? or, because we don't know yet exactly what's going to come of this. The United States has a habit of pretending to capitulate while making things even worse in the background. And that could happen too. I don't want to predict the United States' future. There's enough people doing that, and they're all wrong. So I don't think something this complicated can be that actively predicted. I think I tried a little bit. I've been suggesting that the United States is on the brink of destruction, and suddenly everybody in the United States seemed to go, we're on the brink of destruction. We better dial it back a little. And they all dialed it back a little, which made me go, ooh, modern people are smarter than I thought they were. And better educated and more literate. And there's much more hope for the future than it seemed. And keep at it, guys. Good going. Yeah, surprise us all. That's the best possible outcome. Surprise everybody with just how cooperative you lot can actually be. And surprise yourselves with learning just how much you really care about each other. Because the future is not written in stone. It may be written in God's memory, but if there's one thing we've learned about memory, it's just how easy it is to rewrite memories. I'm weird that way too. My memories don't get rewritten. Data may be adjusted. Holes may sometimes form. Those holes are tagged and flagged, not written over. I've verified this enough. I don't need to prove to you that it's true. It's part of the autism. And so for me to be able to observe it in other people, I'm more able to observe it in other people because I'm able to directly observe it in watching the world change its memory of events that I witnessed, or individuals around me change the story about events that I witnessed. And I think everybody's had an example of that happen to them. And I think that at some point, everybody at some point has disagreed to change their memory of events in agreement. And yet at the same time, we also see plenty of evidence, such as abuse victims who convince themselves it wasn't that bad, or narcissists who convince themselves that it was worse. And they believe it by the time they're telling you the story. So it's really hard to say if God's memory is mutable or not. God's memory is the only place the future is written, is what I'm saying. And God's forgotten everything already. That's why we're doing it all again. That's why the world, the universe, keeps restarting. It plays out because time doesn't exist. This is all happening at the same time. The universe plays out and then restarts and then plays out again and then restarts. And it's impossible to know if it plays out the same, because when it restarts, God forgets and it all starts over. And so God is reincarnating, even as we are. I know, that's not the Christian philosophy in the least. That's fine. The book of Moses is where Christians and Jews and Muslims all got their God. And if you go back and just read the book of Moses, pick a version. The closer to the original, the better, but it really doesn't make that big of a difference. Actually read the stories in it. My favorite version, I highly recommend it. It's been very recently published by R. Crumb. It's an illustrated novel version of the Book of Moses. The text, as scribbled by Mr. Robert Crumb, is accurate to King James II version of the Bible. The one that most people inevitably go, well, we trust those scholars above the rest. True or not, someone will always argue. But it's not that important because there isn't any way to put a slant on, so they raped everybody, or so they waited until their host was asleep and woke up and killed him and took his lands and his wife. There's no way to put a slant on that. The guy was invited, a weary traveler was invited in for the night and slayed his host while his host lay sleeping, raped his women, and took all his goods and lands and claimed them for himself and brought his relatives in to help him claim it. And that's the guy that started the religion, that started the three religions that spend all their time fighting with every other religion and each other. That's a different rant. Bye.